Would you ever eat your houseplants? Now this video was originally going to be on interesting facts about plants, but as I was doing the research I kept coming across facts that were talking about edible houseplants, either those that are fully edible or those that in their natural habitat have edible components. And I'm not talking about the vegetables and things that we can grow indoors, like this tomato for example. I'm talking about plants that we would have in our standard houseplant collection that, as I said, are either fully edible or have edible components. So some of these might surprise you, they definitely did surprise me, and I'm sure some of these you will know already, but do let me know if there are any others you know of in the comments below. It's always good to learn new things about plants, and I'll also drop the other facts that I found out in the video at the end as a bit of a bonus, as some of these link to previous videos that I've also got on the channel. So any of these plants that I cover or the bonus facts at the end, if they link to a previous video on the channel, I will put those in the description below so you can watch those next if you want to, or add them to your watch later playlist. So we'll start with Oxalis, and this is Oxalis triangularis. This one is a little bit worse for wear, as you'll see. This was a rescue plant that I bought recently from a clearance section in a garden centre, so it's busy recovering, trying to fill out the pot. Now this one is fully edible, so the corms, the leaves and the stems can be eaten. The leaves and stems have a zingy or bitter taste to them because they contain a lot of oxalic acid, and they can be used on things like salads or really on any dishes. But what you might decide to use them for, because of the wonderful shape and colour, they can be used for decorative effect, but then if you're using them on food, you know they can be eaten too, or just for that extra sort of zing and flavour if you're putting them in a salad for example. Now these do have a little bit of caution with them because they contain a lot of oxalic acid, only to eat them in moderation because a lot of oxalic acid can cause some stomach discomfort. So it's not too different from other things with high concentrations of that acid. For example, rhubarb, that's another very acidic, very tangy type fruit that is often cooked down to try and alleviate some of that, or with lots of sugar added in to alleviate some of that, but obviously again, only eat it in moderation. So this is possibly one, if you decide to take it out of your collection and try it in your culinary efforts, something else you can use to add a bit of colour and possibly flavour to your dishes. And the second one is colocaceous. So I did have a corm to show you as a prop, but I can't seem to find it in the collection, so I'm not sure what I've done with it. But I will show you some photos on screen so you can see the plant. You might already be familiar with them. They're very similar to alocasias, but they generally grow a lot larger. They're often grown outdoors, but you can grow them as indoor plants as well if you've got the room and the right conditions for them. So they're also called elephant ears, so you might have seen them go by that name in the past. Now all of the parts of this plant can be eaten, the corm, the stems and the leaves, and they often are in their native habitats where the communities obviously use them as a staple part of their diet. The only caveat to this is they do need to be cooked and prepared correctly because they contain calcium oxalate crystals, which can cause a lot of discomfort and pain and possibly require medical attention if you happen to eat some. So make sure, if you do decide to eat any of your colocaceas, then make sure you do some research and find out how to prepare it correctly so that you are eating it safely. And this third one is one I'm sure you'll all know. This one is the Monstera Deliciosa. So this one produces edible fruits that are supposedly delicious, and they grow from a monstrously large plant, hence where it gets its name from. So this will usually produce fruit in its native conditions outdoors, and it's unlikely to produce fruit in indoor settings, but it's not impossible. I have seen some posts where people have achieved it, but I'm sure it'll take a lot of dedication and care to provide the right conditions to get the plant to mature and then flower and then fruit. So if you are ever travelling anywhere where they are native and they grow outdoors, see if you can find the fruit anywhere where you can maybe buy it and try it, as I'm sure that'll be really interesting as a houseplant enthusiast. And for the fourth plant, I've brought this one back from the start. This one is the Pachira Aquatica, or I have seen someone online say it's Pachira Aquatica, so do let me know in the comments below what you think it is. Is it Pachira? Is it Pachira? What would you call it? Now this one I do have a dedicated video for, all about the care needs for them as houseplants, a bit more information about their origins and some general interesting information about the plant. So if you do want to watch that next, or maybe add it to a watch later playlist, I've put the link to the video in the description below. Now this one grows very large in its natural habitat. It produces very showy flowers and then produces nuts, so that's where it gets some of its common names from. So the French peanut, the Guyana chestnut and the Malabar chestnut, just to name a few. So this will often be, the nuts will often be eaten by those obviously that live in that sort of vicinity, the communities where these are native, and those nuts can be cooked and eaten in very much the same way we might eat our standard chestnuts, and apparently they taste very similar too. Now the flowers that they come from as well can also be cooked and eaten, as can some of the smaller leaves. Maybe not the larger leaves as they get quite tough and leathery, but the smaller leaves can be too. So in a houseplant setting, it's very unlikely, just like the Monstera, that they will produce flowers and nuts, as they will do that when they are much bigger, mature plants. But you might be able to still try the smaller leaves. Now again, just like with any of these plants that I'm talking about, if you do decide to eat any of these or try them that require any preparation, just do some research first and make sure you're preparing them correctly so that they are safe to eat. And now for the fifth plant, the Fishbone Cactus. This isn't one that I've got in my collection, but it is on the wish list. So these produce edible fruits, although it is a very unique and interesting plant. So these have nocturnal flowers, so they produce flowers in the right conditions, which they can produce flowers in indoor settings, and they produce the flowers which open at night. They've got a very strong scent which is designed to attract moths to come and pollinate the flowers. However, obviously in an indoor setting, hopefully you don't have moths, but if you want to, you can obviously wait and then hand pollinate the flowers, and then once the flowers are pollinated, they should produce these little green fruits that you can get from the cactus. Now these can take 6 months to ripen, so you do have a bit of a waiting game, and you've obviously got to stay up for the nocturnal flowers to be able to hand pollinate them. But I'm sure if you do and you are patient, you'll be rewarded with those little green fruits that the cactus can produce. And this sixth one might surprise you. This one is an Opuntia, a type of cactus. So these obviously come in lots of different varieties, just like any other plants. This one is a smaller variety for the house, but you can get larger ones, and in their natural habitat they will grow bigger. Now these have a couple of edible parts. The petals are edible, as well as it producing edible fruits known as prickly pears. So from what I've seen from the photos, they look a little bit like this, just a bit fatter, and they go a reddish colour when they are ripe. Now if you're wanting to eat this, of course you've got to contend with it being a cactus. So while you can get spikeless or spineless versions, usually they will have spikes or spines on them. Not only that, but they also have these little hair-like thorns on them, which are called glockids, which can be a major irritant. So of course you don't want to eat those, or even get those on your skin or in your skin. So if you are deciding to eat these, obviously you have to prepare them in a very specific way to make sure they are safe to eat. So usually that is cutting off the spikes or spines and then using an open flame to singe off any of these hair-like thorns. If you do decide to eat them, just like with any of the other things that I've mentioned, make sure you Google it, make sure you double check the correct process to make sure it's safe for eating before you try it. Now if you have tried these, whether it is something that is native to you, depending on where you live, or if you've tried it when you've been on holiday, or even just eaten your houseplants if you've got them, then do let me know in the comments below. What do they taste like, the paddles and the prickly pears, because it'd be really interesting to know. Now for this seventh one, this is another I don't have in the collection, although I was trying to find one for the video, but I wasn't able to get my hands on one. Now these are scented geraniums. They're actually a type of pelargonium, but you can get them in lots of different varieties where they have different scents or flavours depending on what you're using them for. So you can use them for their scented properties, where they are in things like toiletries for example, and you can use them for their flavours if you were to use them in cooking. So rather than eat these like you might some of the other plants where they might be fruits or vegetables, you would use these in a similar way to how you might use herbs. So you could use these to flavour teas, for example, or put on salads for a bit of extra flavour, or maybe add to cooking if you wanted to add some extra flavour to whatever dish you are making. So these, again, are amazing in terms of the variety of the different scents or flavours that you can get. So do shop around and see what you can add to your collection. So I will definitely be trying to find some of these to add to my collection. And number 8 is a plant that was really popular during the plant craze a couple of years ago, and you might still have one in your collection. It's the Ficus lyrata, or Fiddle Leaf Fig. Now these can produce fruits just like a normal fig tree, but they are usually a little bit smaller and maybe not as sweet, but they are still edible if you wanted to use them for something. Now you can also grow the ordinary fig, or Ficus carica, as an indoor plant as well. So if you wanted to get the lyrata's cousin and get a traditional fig plant, then you can grow those indoors too and get fruit from that. So whichever one you try, given the right conditions, keep an eye out for flowers and possibly fruit. And now on some of the more general interesting houseplant facts, and I've brought this cactus back as that's what we'll be talking about first. So cacti can of course produce flowers which look fantastic when you've got that splash of colour on the green trunk, but sometimes when we go into houseplant shops or garden centres, we'll see some really brightly coloured cacti that maybe look like they've got some really unusual flowers growing on top of them. But these are actually grafted cacti, so these are two different types of cacti that have been stuck together. So usually it's where you've taken a very attractive cacti with a brightly coloured top or unusual shape, and then cut it off and stuck it onto a rootstock cacti. So when you are next shopping and you see cacti that look really unusual, maybe they're two different shapes or two different colours, go and have a closer look and see where they've possibly been stuck together. Now the interesting thing about this is you can actually try this at home. If you've got any cacti you want to experiment with, you can find guides online, and it is something that I will be trying in the future, so I'll probably do a future video on me experimenting with cacti and trying to graft them. So stay tuned for that if you want to see that in the future. Subscribe so you're notified when that video comes out. But again, if you've ever tried it yourself, let me know in the comments below how you got on and did they successfully graft. And now on to Marimo moss balls, and these are growing in popularity. I'm seeing them more and more in plant shops and garden centres, at least here in the UK. Now these aren't actually moss, they are a type of algae, and they have a really difficult name to pronounce. So it's Igograppilla linnea or linnei, and these have a fascinating origin story, and as well as a cultural significance in Japan. They actually have national treasure status in Japan, and I've got a dedicated video all about these, their history and origins on the channel, so I'll link that in the description. If you do want to learn more about Marimo moss balls, then check out that link in the description and watch that next, or save it to a watch later list. And the last one is new varieties of plants aren't always new, so sometimes they're created years ago or even decades ago, but they only become popular when they hit the market en masse and become widely available. So this is the Philodendron Painted Lady, and I do have a dedicated video again on this, the care needs, and more about its origins and history, so I'll link that in the description if you do want to watch that next, or again add it to a watch later playlist. So this was created 60 years ago by the Macaulay team in Florida, or thereabout 60 years ago. So this is a very old type of plant or variety of plant, but it only really became popular a couple of years ago. The same with the Philodendron Prince of Orange. That is, should I say, decades old, but that really became popular nearer the start of the plant craze. And again with the Philodendron Pink Princess, same story. So we've got all of these different plants that look like they're new to us, but sometimes it's not necessarily that they're a new plant, they could just be an old plant having their it plant moment. So after watching that, will you be eating any of your houseplants? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you do decide to try any, as I said throughout the video, make sure you check the correct ways to prepare them so that you are eating them safely. And if you have found this video interesting, then consider subscribing. I'll have new videos usually every week or two, always on plant related topics. And I've linked all of the videos that I've mentioned throughout this video in the description below for quick reference if you want to watch those next, or add them to a watch later list. And I'll also link one at the end for quick reference. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll respond to everyone. And as always, thank you for watching Grow Your Wellbeing.